Today I want to draw the uppercase letters with you. So all that you're going to need for this is your workbook, we're on page 21, and some tracing paper and your brush pen. So the uppercase letters are not based on the basic strokes, so they're a little bit unique, but I just wanted to go through and draw each of these with you. So for the capital letter A, it's going to start at the baseline, and it's going to be like an upstroke, except it's going to go all the way up, and we're going to come back down to the waistline again. So that's the basic shape. Then we're just going to add a crossbar to cross the A, and that's it. The next one is going to be a B. This one starts with a little upstroke or entry stroke. We have a downstroke, heavy pressure, and then we're going to do these two O form shapes. So we have one, and we have two, and then that transitions into an upstroke. Next is C. This one is also similar to the lowercase c, but we're just adding a little bit of flourishing here. So we're actually going to start here, and we're going to do one loop, and then we're going to come into the C. Instead of ending it here, we're going to keep curving it and come down. So it has just some extra flourishing on this one. I'm going to go to the next page, and we'll go through these ones. And ideally, when you're practicing these, you can draw one, trace one or two, and then draw a few on your own. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go through each of them with you at this point. So for the capital D, this one has an upstroke, and in this example, I turned it into a loop. It's the same as the B. There's just a loop there, and sometimes that's fun to add loops just to make things look a little special. Then it's basically an O form, and then an upstroke. So that's our D. And then the last one on this row that we're gonna do is an E. So this one is similar to the C, that we're gonna start with this little entry loop before we get into it. And it's basically two O forms stacked on top of each other. E is one of the hardest letters for me to do, so if that one's a little bit of a struggle, don't worry, just take some practice. F is gonna be a thin stroke across the top, then we have a downstroke that curves up, and then a crossbar. G is going to look similar to the C, that it has kind of this flourishing at the top. So there's one large loop, transitions into the O form shape, and then we have a descending loop, and then an upstroke. So this one does have a lot of the basic strokes in it. So some of them do have basic strokes in them, and some of them don't. It just depends on the letter. Next is H. This one is going to have an upstroke, and then it's like a descending loop, but it doesn't go below the baseline. Then it's going to curve back up and do another loop and turn into an underturn. So that's the H. Next is an I. This again has this upstroke, entry stroke, and it's going to be a loop that turns into a downstroke right there. J is really similar to the I. We just want to make this part of it a little more curved, and then it turns into a descending loop. So they're very similar here in this negative space. We just want this one to be a little bit more rounded, more like a bowl. Next is K. This one is going to be, again, on a little upstroke, downstroke, and it's kind of similar to the lowercase k, in that it has these two kind of angled lines, both that would be thick. All right, moving along. Next is the letter L. And this one is gonna have an ascending loop, and a little baby loop, and then just this thin line that comes out. And you'll notice on some of my letters, things get a little shaky, so I'll just go over them very lightly in those areas, and that's okay. If that's happening to you, just go over the little areas that are a little messy and you can kind of clean them up as needed. The M is going to be an upstroke, and then a downstroke, and then a big overturn, and kind of a big compound curve. And N is going to be the same, this little entry stroke. This one has a little loop on there. Again, that's just a stylistic choice. You could keep it like the M if you wanted. And then it just has this big compound curve on it. That's N. Next is O. This one is stylized, so instead of starting at the 2 o'clock position and making a complete O form, we're just kind of starting here and working around. There's still enough room to make our transition. And then we're adding this loop to the top. So this is a stylized O. You could just draw it like a regular O form and have that be your capital O. Next is the letter P. This one is going to have, again, a little entry stroke. On all of these letters, the entry stroke could just be omitted. It doesn't have to be there, I just think it looks nice. A downstroke and then an O form, and we're just going to carry it through a little bit to make it a little more stylized. Next is a Q. This is going to be exactly the same as the O. So we're starting over here more like a 1 o'clock position, so we still have enough room to transition. And then we're just making a big loop on the top. And for this part of the Q, I kind of turn my pen, normally I'm drawing like this, kind of turn my pen up this way so I can get a nice thick line that's going at an angle. I do that also on the K's and the R's. So for example, again, this R, upstroke, downstroke, O form. When I get here, I'm gonna again turn my pen this way so I have the full width of the tip to be going at an angle, and it makes it just a little bit easier. Next we have the S. This one's gonna have this little upstroke and curve down and back up. And you see right here, my transition wasn't that good, so I'm just gonna kind of try to fix that a little bit so it's a little bit smoother, and sometimes it makes it worse when you keep adding to it, so be warned. On S's, this whole side right here and down is gonna be thick. Getting close to the end of the alphabet, the next one is a T. This is going to be similar to the F. So it's just going to be this thin line across, a downstroke, and then it curves up. T. Next is a U. It's going to be an upstroke, it turns into a little loop. And we've got an underturn and another underturn, very similar to a lowercase u. V, this one is also very similar to the lowercase v. It's basically the same thing, an underturn and a comma dot with a little entry stroke. W is going to be an upstroke, an underturn, another underturn, and a comma dot. And I got a little messy. Let's try to clean that up a bit. We have just 3 more letters. X. This is also similar to the lowercase version. So it's going to be like kind of like a compound curve going on there, and then just an upstroke. A Y has an upstroke with an underturn, and then lastly a descending loop. And then the very last letter is going to be a Z, and this one has this little loop, and then a diagonal downstroke, another little loop, and then a thinner line. So there you have it, all the lowercase letters, the uppercase letters. If you have any questions about specifics on these, let me know.